I've been living in Chicago for 8 years, helped dozens of clients move here, even driven thousands of people to various places in between the city when I was a rideshare driver when I first moved here for a few years, and can honestly say that though I love to visit and can appreciate what the other great American cities have to offer, nothing beats Chicago for me in terms of where I would want to live and just have as my home base. That said though, even I can't look at Chicago with 100% rose-colored glasses. There are pros and cons to everything in life, and living right here in Chicago is no different. So in this video, I will address the first 5 pros and cons that come to mind, with maybe a few bonus points along the way. My name is Jake Lyons, realtor with @Properties here in Chicago and founder of thechicagohomesource.com, bringing you well-informed, data-driven content. And let's go ahead and get right into the first pro, which is, of course, what else could it possibly be? Summers in Chicago. I haven't been in every city in the world, far from it, but I'd be shocked if there was a city demonstrably better than Chicago in the summer. There are half a dozen festivals to choose from every weekend, ranging from food festivals, art festivals, cultural festivals, and way more than that. This is when you realize that Chicago has a legitimate beach scene, and it pretty much rivals anything you could find on any of the coasts. This is when outdoor dining throughout Chicago's incredible restaurant scene, more on that later, and rooftop decks have become possible, and the energy here is just amazing, and summer in Chicago is just something that has to be experienced. And given what my first pro was, you might be able to guess what my first con is going to be, and that is, of course, winters in Chicago. The reason summers are such a high here is because winters are such a low. We earn our summers around here, and though we don't get quite the absurd snowfall amounts as our neighbors to the north like Minnesota and Wisconsin, it's not unusual at all to see up to a foot of snow on the ground and temperatures well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and that can last for days, if not weeks. To add insult to injury, when March and April start rolling around and you start thinking maybe this is over, winter always proves to be a very difficult house guest to kick out. Though you'll start to see some nicer days around this time, you're really not officially out of the woods on winter until May, if not even early June sometimes. Pro number 2 that I'm going to talk about here is public transit and walkability. The Chicago Transit Authority, commonly referred to as CTA or the L, is among the best public transit systems in America, despite being one of the oldest. You can get just about anywhere in the city by taking the train, and the few places where the train isn't convenient to get to, there is still a robust bus system that you can hop on and take you where you need to go. It's also highly walkable. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a single street in Chicago that doesn't have a sidewalk. In the vast majority of the city, you're never too far from being able to walk to some kind of restaurant, shopping area, or attraction. The flip side of that is the con of traffic, tickets, construction, and parking. Bottom line, owning a car here is not impossible, but it can certainly be difficult. The traffic is insane. The 90-94 highway that cuts right through the middle of the city through downtown has at times been deemed literally the worst highway in America in terms of traffic. Fun fact, numbers 2 through 6 on that list are all in LA. Driving within the city really isn't much better, as parts of it are just so dense, with the blocks so short that all the stop and go traffic with the street lights and the stop signs and all that just make it feel like you're never really going anywhere. I'm used to it now and have learned to simply build it into my set of expectations for the day, but moving here from a city in Indiana where driving is relatively easy was an adjustment to make for sure. Construction is rough as well and will make you feel like a rat in a maze when your normal route's suddenly not available for a few days or weeks or months. When they leave, they call it fixed and just put these stupid metal slabs on the street until they come back later maybe and finish it. Sometimes these slabs just stay here for God only knows how long. And last thing I'll say is just be aware of street signs that tell you when and where you can park. I probably amassed about a dozen parking tickets in my first year alone of living here, just because of not following the signs that tell me when I shouldn't be parking there, and a lot of you can't park here overnight and things like that I just ignored and got my car towed, and hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars worth of tickets later I learned that lesson. So one thing that I will say is to download the Spot Hero app. I am not affiliated in any way with Spot Hero, but it makes parking in Chicago doable, especially closer to downtown when there really aren't many options available for street parking. This video is brought to you by thechicagohomesource.com, the last website you'll ever need for anything Chicago real estate related. There's a link in the description below, so after this video, go ahead and head there and get your journey started. The third pro that I want to get into, I'm excited for this one. This is probably my personal number one, is the incredible food scene here in Chicago. The culinary scene in Chicago is absolutely world-class, regardless of your taste or your budget. Some of the most well-known Chicago dishes are, of course, the Chicago-style hot dog with the mustard and the neon green relish with onions and peppers and tomatoes, but never ever ketchup. That's very important. Chicago-style pizza that feels more like a lasagna than a pizza, and Italian beef sandwiches. But it goes much deeper than that. With a city as diverse as Chicago, you can find just about any cuisine you could possibly think of here. We have just about every Asian cuisine, African, European, Mediterranean, South American, just barbecue, steakhouses, so many steakhouses, some of the world's most renowned and truly game-changing restaurants if your wallet can handle it. Some of those restaurants start at around $500 a person, and the waiting lists are actually months to get into there, and everything in between. If you come to Chicago hungry, you will not be disappointed, I promise you that. The next con that I'm gonna get into is taxes. So at 10.25%, Chicago has the second highest sales tax rate in the country, next only to Tacoma, Washington. So in your face, Tacoma. 3 California cities actually round out the top 5. This is a quick fun fact. This obviously makes a big dent in your ability to actually enjoy these restaurants, all these shopping districts that we have, and all the other fun things that we can get into here in Chicago. According to LendingTree.com, Chicago also has the 7th highest property taxes of any major metro area, less than places like New York City, Boston, San Francisco, and Austin, but more than places like Los Angeles, Seattle, and Philadelphia. The next pro is the fact that Chicago has a very diverse economy. A lot of big companies are here, and we have a relatively low cost of living. Depending on what source you read, Chicago is home to 35 Fortune 500 companies, which is second only to New York City. And even the companies that aren't technically headquartered here have a very large presence, like Google, Amazon, Meta, Boeing, etc., etc. The list goes on. The economy here is very diverse, not being overly reliant on any one or two industries, and it has a huge startup tech scene and is known as one of the best cities to actually start a business due to all the universities and proximity to other more established companies and talent. It also has a favorable cost of living compared to the other top 10 or so biggest cities in America. Con number 4, I believe we're up to now, is state debt and political corruption. The gloves are off on this one. Now we're getting into it. So it's true, the state's balance sheet does not have a very positive future outlook, given some unfortunate decisions made in the past regarding how the state pensions were calculated and handled, among other things. This has resulted in a situation where our pensions are drastically underfunded, but by law must be paid anyway. This is the main culprit that we can blame those high taxes on that we discussed earlier. There have been some proposed measures to fix it. They have thus far not gone anywhere, and while I'm not in the business of commenting on politics per se, pretty much anyone with any sense can see that the pension situation is not sustainable in the long run, and something's gonna have to give, and no one's quite sure what. As for the corruption piece, at this point, political corruption is almost an endearing mainstay of Chicago culture, like hot dogs and Benny the Bull. Seems like rarely will a week go by when there isn't some kind of shenanigan in the news about another alderman or a senator or judge, or insert some role here that isn't getting caught up in some kind of scandal. Though it's maybe not quite to the extent that it's been in the past, it's still very much a thing. And this is the Chicago way at this point, and has been for a very long time. The 5th and final official pro that I'll get into in this video is the neighborhoods. When most people think of Chicago, they probably think of the downtown areas with the big skyline and the tall buildings and Navy Pier. Maybe they think of the lakefront beach and the parks and things like that. And that's all awesome. That's cool, that's great. That is a fantastic part of what Chicago has to offer, but there's so much more than that. Chicago actually has 77 different community areas. Many are broken down further into smaller neighborhoods. So for example, like the near north side is a community area, but within the near north side would be River North, Gold Coast, Streeterville, Old Town, etc. Each of these offers something different to the people living there and visiting. Different cultures, different housing types, cuisine types, proximity to different amenities. You can check out different areas of the city and truly feel like you're going on a temporary little vacation. So that's one of the main things I love the most about Chicago, is that there's just so much to see and so many different ways of experiencing this city. The last con that I have planned for you in this video is high crime, or at least the perception of high crime, right? It's the elephant in the room. It has to be addressed. Peruse the news for long enough and you're bound to come across some unsightly headlines or someone saying that Chicago is the most dangerous place on earth and that no one should ever go there under any circumstances. And I'm not here to sweep anything under the rug or to diminish the reality that a lot of people in the city do face and have faced. As a realtor, I'm really not allowed to say very much on this topic due to fair housing laws. I did do a separate video where I went about as deep on this topic as I thought possible, which I'll link somewhere around this video. What I will say here is just do your own research, talk to people who live in the areas that you're thinking about, to pay attention to the per capita stats as well as the raw figures, and just make the best decision for you and your family possible. I can't tell you where you should go, but once you do your own research, you can come to me and tell me where you want to go, and I will help you to best achieve that goal. How about a bonus pro here at the end for all you people who have stuck around with me throughout this whole video? So here is one of my favorite things about Chicago, is the fact that we have touristy things that don't suck. We have some of the best museums in the world. We have the Art Institute, which is one of the most highly ranked art museums in the world. We have the Field Museum, which is, think of the Smithsonian Natural History Museum as that, but pretty much on par with that. We have the Sheds Aquarium, which is exactly what it sounds like. We have the Adler Planetarium. We have the Museum of Science and Industry. We have the Chicago Museum. We have all that. We have just all kinds of just awesome stuff to visit, and it's legitimately cool, legitimately interesting. One of my favorite things about living in Chicago is seeing how much of a tourist attraction that it is when hundreds of thousands, millions of people a year come to Chicago every year just to look at our stuff. So that's a really cool thing, at least in my opinion. A lot of people here can get a little jaded when it comes to the tourists and oh, they don't know where they're going. They're just walking all over the place. They're not paying attention, whatever. But I love it because it just reminds me of how cool the city is that I live in, that this many people are willing just to come and enjoy a couple days in the city.